Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Plus Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ plus communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we're covering on this week's episode. The legislative attacks, really against all of our trans siblings, are coming fast and furious. Where are the latest attacks and what do you need to know? Period poverty. That's right, period poverty. What is it and what are folks doing to address it? There are some other folks out there who are doing some really important LGBTQ plus work that you may not know, but you soon will in our latest round of Who the Heck Is That? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, Executive Director of Queer Kentucky, a GLAAD Award nominated for Outstanding Independent Journalism Newsroom, and herself a recipient of a pretty darn important LGBTQ plus Journalism Leadership Award from our, I used to say sister newsroom. We're going to change that to sibling newsroom. Missy Spears. Missy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's exciting to be back.
Fresh off the GLAAD Awards, how was it out there in the California?
Oh my gosh, it was so nice. It's just crazy to walk around that ceremony and see people that you watch on TV, just like chatting normally.
I feel they were saying the same about you. We'll talk more about that. And joining us for the first time, movement journalist and freelance reporter who has written for everyone from Salon to Queer Tea to Pride Source to his own Substack. It is called The Fourth Estate, a weekly update on the media industry's battle with corruption, corporate influence, and political pliability, which I feel like you made that difficult to say just so I could stumble over it, but I did not. Nick Fulton, welcome to the podcast.
So happy to be here, Ken. Thanks for including me.
Oh, so happy to have you. Our LGBTQ plus Reporters Roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. Well, we have to start in Kentucky, Missy, because your state's, and I still don't know if this is bizarre or blessed, your very short legislative session, it's on right now, it looks like, and it's resulted in what also looks like an onslaught of anti-LGBTQ plus bills, specifically targeting our trans siblings. Missy, I'm only a few miles across the border in Ohio, but it looks pretty bad from here. Am I right in that?
Yes and no. Having a part-time legislature is good and bad. They have a limited amount of time to make harm. So that's one of the good things about it. The big bad, RIP Buffy, had to have one reference in there.
Yeah.
The big bad that we're looking at is Senate Bill 72 right now, which would allow any hospital employee, whether it's a public or a private hospital, to refuse care if their conscience just isn't feeling it that day. This extends to pharmacists, hospital workers at every level. And it's especially scary for queer and trans folks that are living in an area with a very limited amount of healthcare providers or pharmacy options. And we're also seeing this bill come through after the Big Beautiful Bill, which is risking 36 different rural hospitals to close already. So, if you are a trans person receiving gender-affirming care and you need to pick up something from your local pharmacy and you have two options in your town, things are looking kind of scary right now. Altogether, we have about 5 bills that we are tracking that have passed one chamber and are waiting to be assigned to a committee in the other. We are kind of to the point, though, in our session where they are not able to put through new bills. They can be kind of creative with what they already have going. So it doesn't mean nothing is off the table. But also the weird part of this, Ken, and I hope I can say this, is that there are some huge wins for queer people behind the scenes.
Yay.
Kind of look at policy like harm reduction. At least one of the bills moving forward was even more extreme, but thanks to some folks behind the scenes working on it, they've been able to roll back some of the most harmful aspects of it. And then the majority of the anti-LGBTQ bills that have been proposed appear to be dead in the water. So I don't want to minimize the harm that does happen from the bills that go forward. Our own research has shown that even the rhetoric and debate around these anti-queer bills leads to an increase in suicidal thoughts. But it is a win that they aren't just railroading any anti-queer or trans bill through, which means that, the relationships, the storytelling, the organizing, and the work that people are doing behind the scenes is really having an impact.
Yeah, we have one of those medical conscience acts here in Ohio. And I remember when it was passed, it had to have been like 2021. It was maybe the second year of the Buckeye Flame. And the then president of the Human Rights Campaign called it the most homophobic bill in the country. And those were beautiful days when that was the most homophobic bill in the country. Now it
Yeah.
has been outdone. And that piece of looking nationally is where I want to bring you into this, Nick. You penned a piece over at Love B. Scott called An Urgent Update on the GOP's Escalating War on Trans Bodies. Suffice to say, Nick, not just a Kentucky thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's an everywhere thing. I know y'all based in Ohio and Kentucky, obviously, the intricate, relationship between the GOP and anti-trans legislation, but it's a problem that every state shares. And even in California, after the Supreme Court ruling about parental rights and outing trans kids in schools, the courts and the school systems here are grappling with how to handle that. And there's proponents of that Supreme Court ruling, even in a bright blue California. And so, trans people represent 1% of the country, but there are hundreds and hundreds of anti-trans pieces of legislation around the U.S. And like I said, in blue states and red states and everything in between. So it's a unique problem with American democracy that targets people who are easy to target and targets people who have been historically marginalized to a point where it's really easy to pick on a 1% when a 99% has the ability and the power to do so. And so I've had the pleasure of documenting a lot of the GOP's war on trans bodies. I've spoken with student leaders at a school like Northwestern and movement leaders at an organization like the Gender Liberation Movement and direct service providers actually in Kentucky. And while, the opposition is great, it's really beautiful to hear from the people who are doing the work and organizing in response and building this groundswell of really human-centered retaliation to really harmful legislation. So yeah, it's scary, but it's not a Kentucky problem. It's not an Ohio problem. It's an everywhere problem. So it's really unfortunate.
Can't tell if that makes me feel better or worse. We're going to find out soon enough. So much more to watch. And speaking of the Supreme Court, spoiler alert for next week, we actually will be speaking with Chris Geidner from Law Dork, an Ohio native. And I'm really excited to talk about those intersections of Supreme Court life. But first, we're going to move to a phrase I have never before used in my life. This is now the third time in my life I'm saying it because I said it twice in the intro. Period poverty. Missy, what is period poverty and what are folks doing in your region to address it?
Yeah, I'm glad that we get to talk about this. Having a uterus is expensive. And period poverty is real, especially, in a state like Kentucky, where we have counties that are way below the national average in terms of income per household. Pads and tampons are expensive. They're also still taxed in Kentucky and other states, which is another issue. And there are far too many kids who just don't have access to them, leaving them to come up with creative methods to take care of their menstrual cycle while also not being made fun of at school. It's hard enough to go through middle school and high school with menstrual products. And the last thing anyone needs to worry about is not having access to these items every month. So enter Skylar Davis, this incredible Kentuckian who has been a badass in the policy and advocating space over the last few years. And in 2022, Skylar founded Period, y'all. It's a nonprofit advocating for reproductive justice and accessible period products for all Kentuckians. But what they ended up doing was with a single table and 40 boxes on it of product, they started with that and they've grown to installing physical period pantries stocked with product. They have them right now in 3 counties in Kentucky, which is incredible. And they've also worked to get products into over 100 schools in the Appalachian region. So 3 installed boxes, working with over 100 schools. This is a huge project that they've done. And I love it because I'm a personal advocate for, if you see a need, just do it. Don't ask for permission. You don't need to make it more complicated than it is. And that's what Skylar did here. Just efficient resource building.
And it was also such local journalism, which I absolutely loved. And I was thinking about how local journalism this is, and it's exactly the kind of piece that results from a reporter speaking with someone and actually writing up that piece. And it is a contrast, and I'm so excited to talk about this, Nick. It's a contrast to how some legacy newsrooms are approaching AI. Nick, I was thrilled and honestly a little bit embarrassed. I will be upfront with you, a little bit embarrassed to see that you wrote about our hometown paper here, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, in your Substack. Catch everybody up on our editor extraordinaire, Chris Quinn, and what he had to say about local journalism.
Yeah, I'm glad you wanted to talk about this too, because the fourth estate is entirely about the news industry, how we get the news, and how it's continually under attack and under a regime of change and adjusting to the world around us. And the news is certainly adjusting in Cleveland. The Plain Dealer in Cleveland.com, specifically Cleveland.com, the editor, Chris, wrote a letter to the editor with the publication unpacking how it will handle AI moving forward, and how it will handle it is integrating it very deeply into the work that they do every single day. And so some specific county coverage will be, the articles will be written by generative AI, and the reporting and fact gathering will be done by the staff reporters, but the actual composition of the articles will be done by an AI platform. Which, we're all grappling with how to include or not include artificial intelligence into our work, but certainly taking writing off of the desk of people who are supposed to be writing is not maybe the most ethical way to do so. And, for many reasons, for the state of our planet, for the communities that we serve, for, workers' rights, there's a plethora of reasons why this is not, a pro-journalism or even just pro-information, a way to handle the inclusion of AI in our newsrooms. And in the letter, he argues that journalism schools have scared new reporters about the use of AI and have kind of been fear mongers around artificial intelligence. And he argues that it should be included and that it could be an essential, pillar of the work that we do every day. Which the newsroom will certainly continue to evolve, but certainly evolving to a place where we no longer have reporters writing is not where I hope it will go. But yeah, scary stuff from Cleveland. And as someone who lived in Ohio for a lot of my life, I was not stellar about hearing the news either.
Gosh, he had a quote in there, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it was basically, the gist was, you wouldn't believe how much time we freed up for our reporters when they didn't have to do the writing anymore. Yeah, you don't say, sir. Also, the writing is kind of the journalism. So, and Missy, we've never talked about this. How is Queer Kentucky doing with AI?
Something that we're exploring right now, actually. I'm bringing on a new editorial manager, and we're going to talk about how it can and mostly cannot be used in our organization. The way that I kind of been looking at it right now is I don't want AI touching anything that comes from a human. As far as the story goes, it's not a fact checker. It's not going to be a writer for us. We are kind of considering our behind the scenes when it comes to the sponsorships and advertising, helping to create a workflow for different aspects outside of the newsroom, just that things that keep the nonprofit moving. We're hoping to have a policy online by June when we really narrow down what we're going to do about it.
I can hereby announce the Buckeye Flame will have a policy in July because we're just stealing Queer Kentucky's, whatever they publish in June. So, and that's not even AI. We are actually using your work product. So I feel really good about our approach to that. Oh my, so much more to come with AI. Well, let's get into one of my favorite games. It's called Who the Heck Is That? That's where I throw out some names that our listeners may not know, and our roundtable tells us why we should indeed know them. Missy, let's start with you. And I went a bit into the archives for this one because I was really excited to tell folks and ask this question. Missy Spears, who the heck is Michelle Hobbs?
Yeah, I love that you pulled Michelle for this. I live in the same community as her. She's incredible. She's on the other side of the river as me. She's in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I interviewed her 2 years ago for a project attached to Bourbon and Belonging, which was the first queer bourbon week in the world. And Queer Tucky was one of the presenters of it. So I show up. She owns a distillery in Cincinnati. Show up to talk to this lesbian distillery owner. And also the founder of the Pet Ones food brand. And all she wanted to talk about was Whitesburg, Kentucky. And let me tell you a little about Whitesburg. It's located in Letcher County. It's right on the Kentucky-Virginia border. It's the home of around 2,300 working class and working poor folks in Kentucky. And Michelle spent a good part of her childhood there, and she now returns there now with her kids and wife. But when Eastern Kentucky was flooded a few years ago, Michelle became a force in our community. She threw on her boots. She went down to Whitesburg and spent weeks there. She had brought other folks from Cincinnati, some folks from the nonprofit La Soup, and they coordinated supplies and ended up providing hot meals to thousands of folks who had just lost everything. So, you show up for one journalistic intent, to talk about, the bourbon industry, and instead said she wanted to put the focus of the article on people that still needed some assistance down there. So just incredible human.
Bourbon and Belonging still goes down as one of my favorite named events that I've ever seen. So that one's a keeper. All right, let's go in for round two. Nick, who the heck is Adam Hollier?
Yeah, I do some national and state political coverage for an outlet called Pride Source, which is just north of Yukon, based in Michigan. And Adam is someone we did a profile on after we ran into his congressional campaign, which then transitioned to a Secretary of State campaign, which then transitioned to a state Senate campaign. But he's a former state senator in Michigan who's running for Michigan's third state Senate district. And the reason that we wanted to do an in-depth conversation with him and people within his circles is because he has made allyship to queer people, specifically Black trans women, the center of his campaign and the center of his service in his previous term. And like I said, trans people represent 1% of the country. And so that other 99% has to have some allies in it and some people who are willing to defend queer people and trans people and gender expansive people loudly. And someone who is a straight man married to a woman, having that profound commitment to queer people and trans people is not as common as I wish it was. And so in talking to him, he said, as I asked him, why did you want to run for office again? What has driven your love for public service and your commitments in your previous roles? And he said that in a conversation walking with his wife after he decided to launch his campaign, they decided that Black trans women in Detroit and in Michigan in general really needed a defender, really needed he really wanted to make them his North Star. And so he did that. He's on the board of the Ruth Ellis Center, which is an incredible LGBTQ organization in Detroit that serves queer youth in the city. And he's secured funding for them. He's advanced legislation that has made Michigan a friendlier place for queer people and gender expansive people. And yeah, he's running this cycle again in a third way, not for Secretary of State or Congress anymore, but state Senate. And I had the pleasure of talking to him and writing a profile on his race and looking forward to seeing all the places that he goes.
It was a wonderful piece. We need more allies, but hopefully we have some allies listening because you are indeed listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Joining me this week, Missy Spears from Queer Kentucky and Nick Fulton from the Fourth Estate. By the by, if you are not subscribed to this podcast, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to This News is So Gay right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it is time, folks. It is time for Glitter Bomb. This is our weekly segment where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they want to amplify. So let's set off a glitter bomb. Nick, let's start with you. Give us a story of queer joy that you saw out there in the world that you want us to know about.
I've been a huge fan of the coverage coming out of Translash, which is an organization dedicated to covering the rights attack on trans people and queer people in general, but also just general coverage that's integral to our community and the movement that we're all building. And they had this piece come out. I want to say it was in the last week or two that centered this family in Houston and how they are defending their trans kids in the midst of statewide attacks on trans people. And it was just beautiful, like how they're showing up for them, how they've launched initiatives and supportive campaigns for them. And I think, we're so often told that parents are like kind of your first either advocate or adversary when you come out as queer or trans or whatever identity you most closely associate with. And so I think hearing a story where, these kids were 8, 9, 10 years old and these parents came alongside them, supported them, and then worked for them and for their community, it was just beautiful. And I was at a drag brunch yesterday and a dad had brought his 2-year-old daughter to the brunch, and just moments like that where I think you can see that there is like just this beautiful ability for parents and loved ones and people who are closest to you to be your biggest ally when, so often those people are not. And so, yeah, I would love to see more of that. And Translash's coverage of it was incredible.
Love it. And love our siblings at Translash. Missy Spears, give us a story of queer joy we should know about.
Yeah, so this one is a little bit more chaotic queer joy, and it has nothing to do with journalism. I'm just really excited. But the third season of Bravo's The Valley premieres on April Fool's Day, which is my second favorite holiday. It's a Vanderpump Rules spinoff. It features two queer couples that actually like each other, which is incredible. And one of the guys in the couples is from Louisville, Zach Wickham. When I was in LA, I got to hang out with a couple people from the show, and they are just the nicest people in the world. So I'm just very excited to see their lives implode on TV in a few weeks.
Do you know that I almost threw Zach into the who the heck is that? But I figured a lot of people know who Zach is. But that was a wonderful chat you had with him. So you met Jasmine then?
Yes, I met Jasmine last year when I was out. Zach actually invited me to Jasmine's fiance's birthday party.
Of course.
So I got to
Of
hang
course
out
he
with
did.
them. There's like everyone was there. They were fighting over the same things they fight on the show. It was so weird. It was so real.
Missy and I are having a watch party together. I have to say, unsolicited recommendation. I don't usually throw in Queer Joy. I let my roundtable do that for me. I finished yesterday the second season of The Boyfriend on Netflix. I cannot recommend this reality show enough. It is so beautiful. The first season revolutionized talking about queer identity in Japan. And I'm telling you, everyone, go watch The Boyfriend. It's basically to reality shows what Great British Bake Off is to cooking shows, right? Like it's just lovely. And yes, they are looking for love on The Boyfriend, but they also are talking about all the cultural norms in Japan that prevent them from being their whole and true selves. So that is my unsolicited recommendation, The Boyfriend. But finally, the gay Super Bowl is now over as all the Oscars have been handed out. But what I want from my roundtable on this week's quick queer culture question, which Oscar award category do you feel that you have the best shot at winning? Nick, Fulton, which category do you have a chance at winning?
Well, I must say, first, I did also watch The Boyfriend the first season. I have some catching up to do, but it is such a cool show.
The second season is so much better. I'm telling you, like the first season was very enjoyable. The
Okay.
second season goes all in. I'm not saying that I cried during the last episode, but I did cry.
Okay, noted. I will have to pick up. But yeah, I feel like my taste in movies is not refined at all. I like a really funny movie or a really scary movie. And I think the intersection of those share is like sometimes they have the best costumes or the craziest costumes. And so I would like to say costuming, but I unfortunately don't think I have the skill set for any of the awards. So I would be very much okay to be a seat filler and just watch the whole thing.
I'll take it. Missy Spears, what category?
I love that he brought up costuming because I was like, that's the one thing I will not win as a lesbian that wears flat. I'm going to say best casting because I'm really excited about the team that we're putting together here at Queer Kentucky. Our founder and incredible editor-in-chief, Spencer, stepped away earlier this month. He had accomplished his last remaining goal, which is to get that GLAAD nomination. And so now he is going on to do the things that he's really wanted to do. So I have a new editorial manager that I am locking up this week in a contract. Very excited to get that announcement out. And then we're also going to be working with another journalism legend that I'm excited to put out there once we get that contract done. So yes, best casting for a cast you cannot see yet, but keep watch for those big announcements from us.
I am wow, that was a bunch of teasers. And of course, as we do, Missy Spears stole my thunder because that is also my answer. Best casting, because I get to put together these roundtables with incredible folks like you all, and we want to hear what's coming up for you in addition to these hiring announcements, and I want to know who the legend is. Missy, what else can we look forward to from Queer Kentucky?
We are taking off this year. We have really honed in on politics and government, public health, and then queer joy the last few years. And I am just so excited that we know who we are and what we want to say. So keep following us for the rest of Kentucky's General Assembly, as it enters its final stretch. We're going to track what bills get passed and what gets passed on the next year because, they always come back like zombies. Stay tuned for a series of stories that we are currently working on where we're tying the impact of federal policies and actions to Kentuckians on the ground. We're working with a lot of first-time journalists with this one. So it's going to be interesting to see, really talented Kentucky creatives, talk about how these policies and actions are affecting them.
Amazing. What do you mean you guys are going to take off this year? You're all the way up there already, but let's see what new heights we can get to. Nick, what is coming up for you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, continually putting out pieces on the Fourth Estate about all the really cool and really sad and really amazing and really scary things happening within the journalism industry. But as a freelancer, there's slow times and fast times, and I'm very thankful that I'm experiencing one of the quicker times. I'm currently working on a national piece for Prism that highlights all of the conservative attorney generals across the country that are now creating lists of trans people. We saw, Kansas recently revoke state ID cards from trans people, and Indiana is allegedly creating a similar list tracking trans people's increasing surveillance on trans people. And so, doing an overview of what that means for the trans people in those states, and also what resources and reactions and responses are coming from organizations and organizers on the ground. And then also a couple pieces in Michigan, doing a deep dive into a deep canvassing effort by Equality Michigan, where they're doing, affirming canvassing around the trans community, door-to-door knocking and storytelling about trans people, and having a level of communication that we haven't really seen before in a canvassing effort, and addressing, the information gap and the limitations of what we can say online and how we can reach people by just knocking on the door and having a conversation from another member of the community. And so diving deeper into that effort too, and looking forward to seeing what we find.
Incredible stuff coming up. Well, my friends, that is actually all the time that we have for this week's episode. I want to thank my roundtable, Missy Spears. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Nick Fulton, a triumphant debut. Please, please keep doing what you're doing with the Fourth Estate.
So happy to be here. Thanks, Ken. And great to meet you, Missy.
Great to meet you.
I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, and if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month. That makes you a firefly, and it truly enables programming like this and sustains our scrappy queer newsroom. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.